My name is Jay Barbeau. I'm the original composer of EverQuest. Had a great time doing that. I've been a musician since age 7, and we'll get more into that, I think. But I had a very interesting ride with Sony and EverQuest. Started off as a audio programmer, but then got into being the composer for EverQuest. And I strove to make it very interactive music, very classically oriented, so that I used all of the composers that were my favorite, from Baroque to Romantic styles. And we're going to talk more about that, but that's basically me.
Right on. So I would say we had such a fun conversation the other night. And honestly, I'm hoping we can cover all the ground that you covered there, because it was just mind blowing.
Then let me give you a little more about my background. I think that will provide some context.
For sure.
I have degrees in both music and engineering, and I've kind of done both of these things, but I'm an electrical engineer by education. And but I got into software development early on, but I wanted to focus on musical applications or interactive applications in my career. And I've sought to do that everything I've done in my career. So that right out of college, first thing I worked for a company called Beetle that made a MIDI guitar controller. And I helped design and program it. And it was a very interesting project, did really well. A MIDI guitar interface based on sonar principles. And we sold it, kind of got squashed by a big company, Yamaha. And but we succeeded in making a really good instrument, fine instrument. I have one still, and I've been working on updating the hardware to modern hardware. So after that, I created some piano teaching software. I am a guitarist first. At age 7, started playing guitar. And age 12, started playing trombone. Age 16, started playing piano. But I focused on piano, especially composition of piano. And took a lot of lessons, classically trained pianist, but I like to learn everything by ear. Even though I read music and I know how to take a piece of music and just read it, that's a different skill set than learning something by ear. So I've always focused on developing my ear whenever I play or write, and especially writing, because I like to go through the process that the composer goes through. No composer starts off with any sheet music. They, just do things in their head. And so there's a process you go through when you hear something in your head and you want to play it. So that's been how my modus operandi for music. Talked about MIDI guitar controller, a piano teaching software that was published by Alfred Publishing, and then worked for Disney for a while, and then got an opportunity to come down to San Diego, where I live now, and work for Sony Interactive in '97.
Yeah.
That's when I made the connection, of course, with EverQuest. Originally, I was just audio programmer for multiple teams that were doing PlayStation development mostly, but they had this niche over on the side in a different building, actually, that was doing PC games, and some of their PlayStation games that were porting over. EverQuest was a PC game that looked like it had great potential and was doing some cool things. So I became involved in that, created the audio well, my responsibility was to make the 3D audio engine, as well as the interactive music engine. So, and then they liked the music I was writing, so I became the composer. And, but I sought always to create very interactive music through MIDI. And because I'd worked on this MIDI guitar controller and had written this PC piano teaching software, I knew a lot about MIDI on PC. I'd written a notation engine, a sequencing engine, and all of that. So I was able to create an interactive music engine based on MIDI. And it worked well for the game at the time because, we were taxing the hardware of a lot of systems at the time. And MIDI was less taxing than other ways. Streaming audio is really pretty low on CPU usage also, but you can do a lot more interactively with MIDI. So it was kind of a design decision to go with MIDI. And I created a custom sound font for the songs I wanted to write. And I focused on orchestral sounds and, some other sounds that would work in different styles. And the card that was used typically for games at the time, for gamers who were serious at all, they used a Sound Blaster Live card. And so Sound Fonts was a downloadable samples that could load onto Sound Blaster sound cards. And so I focused for that kind of to try to make that sound good and work good. And that's how the music, I worked within those parameters, and that's how the music came to be the way it is, really. I compose things by arranging and writing kind of at the same time. I would write things where I'd lay down a background kind of for the melody that I wanted to play, and or how I composed it. I wanted a texture, and sometimes that was strings, sometimes it was horns, sometimes it was piano. Lots of times, I kind of make a piano piano approximation of things, but I always filled it in and tried to make it, creative and full orchestrally. I didn't want it to be just kind of tinky sounding. And so, now I think I'm using much better synthesizers now when I create music, and there's amazing technology now. So I'm actually, I've done some reworking of the EverQuest tunes with modern technology, but I want to do everything and make it available using that. So
yeah, it's funny because the transition when you came on to the team, basically there was a question in chat. It's like, oh, was that EverQuest or was it some other game? But because the transition's so quick in your story, you're like, all right, and then I'm on the team, and next thing you know, you have all this wonderful music. So I'm curious, how did that like early period sort of kick off? Did you?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a couple pieces to demo how my style, what I wanted. Maybe the first thing I wrote, I think they didn't have totally positive feedback, but the music director kind of gave me some direction. And there's a guy who was a music director for all the teams in Sony Interactive at the time. It wasn't just EverQuest. And he gave me some thoughts. And then the next thing I wrote, they liked. very much. And then I started working on, but that became the Keynotes theme, dun ba dun 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 dun, that theme. And then, excuse me, the theme, the main EverQuest theme, I really wanted something that was that would stand out and be substantial sounding.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked on that, but then I had been doing my way of writing is to sit down and experiment with progressions, harmonic chord progressions, and textures. And I love complex harmonies. I love different styles of classical harmonies, but different styles of jazz and romantic and pop and rock sounds. I experiment with everything, and so I just kind of was focused on creating sounds that would create a world, and based on what my feelings for each of the zones that I was playing around in, and what I thought fit the area. And then also I would write not just for a zone, but also for activities, of course. So there's combat activity, there's when you're doing just little things, anything that's triggered off an animation. I think we talked about this before, Sean, that when in the game, there's different things you can trigger off of. And what I did for the zone was I created a music object for each zone, and that would trigger the music. But I also did some things where your proximity to the music object could turn on and off different tracks. So that made it a little more interactive. It could even tell you, okay, maybe there's a big monster over here that you're going to fight. So there's an ominous feeling as you get closer and closer to it. And that was one method. But the other method is trigger off of your animations, whatever your character's doing. So if he's swimming, that's one type of music that would happen when you're in the water swimming. If you're falling, another animation. If you're sneaking around, there's another animation. Different music for that. If you're but mostly combat, of course, and I wrote a few different combat tunes so that you didn't always get the exact same thing, and it was a little different. That's another one of the important concepts, I think, when I wrote things, was to never repeat too often, so that it was not boring. I didn't want just droning on music in the background. So, and the way I wrote the pieces was in a seamless way, so it could repeat seamlessly. It wrote a piece, it may change keys several times, but then at the end, it goes back to the original key, so that when it cycles back, you don't notice that there's any seam. But also, I try to make sure that it's not playing the same thing too often. So things may change up, even though if you're staying in the same zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the EQ theme song, because when you mentioned it, then a couple of people immediately perked up in chat, and one person noted, makes the hair on my arm still stand up, and
that's great.
And for a lot of us, when I'd gone without playing for quite a while and then came back in and load it back up, and you hear that theme song, it's like goosebumps, get a little teary-eyed. How did I mean, did it just happen or?
Well, lots of times writing music, at least for me, is stream of consciousness kind of thing. But it's also, you got to sit down and purposely work at it. I found, and I've written music for musical plays. I've written 12 musical plays. and in my college days and earlier. And so I had the concept of situational writing, and I knew I wanted something grand sounding and yet and memorable. And so I kind of started off with the beginning, how it opens up, and I imagined a grand opening kind of a thing, and that's how I built it. Actually, if you listen to different versions of the EverQuest theme song, if you said you heard the rock version, I wrote a different opening for that even. And one of the main uses of it early on was for the E3 demo. And so I created some music that was a compilation, started with the main theme, went into the battle music, and it had a little bit of keynotes in it. And so I wrote like an overture of different music. And then it had a grand opening and then a bombastic ending that kind of, I tried to end big also. And I think that's one of the things you do as a composer. You want to catch people's attention early, and then do things that are interesting in the middle, and then end big. And so that's kind of how I approached writing the theme song and all the different songs. But some of them, mostly I'm thinking about what do I enjoy about music, and what is the chord progressions that I like, and so to tell you some of my influences, I know early on I listened to pop music like everybody else, the Beatles and this, and way back, I've been around for a while, so the bands I liked in the 80s were bands like Toto and Chicago and Queen and orchestral sounding bands, but that were good musicians. Not always orchestral, but they had good arrangements. And then in college, of course, I was listening to a lot of classical music. I loved the music of Tchaikovsky, Grieg, and Ride of the Valkyries, Wagner. And some of those composers just had a way to do things, and they were writing music in the late 1800s before even jazz was a thing, and they kind of stretched classical music. I look at the history of music, and there's some music in EverQuest that's patterned after my interest in Johann Sebastian Bach. And I love Bach's music. And so he inspired me in a lot of ways, but romantic music is more where I centered. I like the way the harmony makes you feel. And it's kind of, romantic is really a prelude to jazz harmonies because it's more complex than simple 1-4-5 classical harmonies. So I experimented with those sounds, and I would camp on chords that made me feel a certain way, and that's just how I go for writing music. I listen to what other people are doing and how it makes me feel, and then I try to make it my own.
When you're looking for what to listen to, is there a process of like you're looking at the zone or you're looking at a specific piece of content and and you think, oh, if I listen to maybe some of this, it's probably going to put me in the right mood for this type of environment? Or
I did kind of that. I'm thinking there was some music that I placed by river. I can't even name of the river right now, but I wrote a theme that was flowing and kind of relaxing, like you're sitting by a river. The music for some people comment about the music for Rivervale.
Yeah.
It's sort of the dwarf zone, and I was thinking of the, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs kind of thing. I was thinking that feeling, but I didn't want to sound like that. But I was thinking, something that gave me March kind of a feel to it. And I'd written some music that worked for that, like that in a play. So I did something that was kind of in that vein. But yeah, I think what's going on in this zone, what are the highlights of this zone, and how can I make music add interest and to it, or highlight the things that are interesting. Even sometimes things that I thought were like, grand structures, for the way the graphics looked at the time, or something that was large or big in EverQuest. I would write music that highlighted that area and then place a music object there so that when you get near it, it would grow and kind of highlight this, the scenery and whatever you're looking at. And sometimes it worked, not always perfectly, but that was my idea behind it anyway.
It's we have the benefit of having a current team member in chat. So as you're describing stuff, we're getting the actual info there. But you were describing the river that goes along in East Corona, and
you
found the track. Yeah, By River is the name.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm thinking, that there's a lot of ways to kind of make you feel that way, but I wrote something that to me gave that, emotion, that emotive. And it's all about doing things. Also, what's important in writing is you don't want to copy as much as you want to be original as much as possible. You want to give the emotion, but yet do it in a way that is a little more surprising. Maybe I talked a little bit about this before, maybe with you, Sean, that music should be surprising to me. It should not be something, I've heard that before, or something that repeats too often. And just the way chord progressions work in music. Everything in music, I was taught this very early by a music teacher, that chord progressions should be an adventure that start from home, and home is usually the one chord, and they lead you on an adventure, but they don't go too quickly back to home. Then eventually they come back around to home. And there's 7 basic chords in a key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I try to use all of context of those chords. And I don't go to 1 too often. And lots of times there's substitutes for those that make you think you're going to 1, but you're not. Instead of going home, I go to what's called a deceptive cadence, which means that you're going to an unexpected place. And I love to do that kind of thing. I like to lead people on adventures in their thinking and their feeling about the music so that they don't know what to expect next. And it's creative and exciting, and
So you just said you take them to a deceptive cadence. Is that a music term, or is that a you term?
Yeah, no, that's a music term.
Okay.
A deceptive cadence. There's chords that have common notes, and some chords have, simple chords. You break them down, they're triads. There's 3 notes in a chord. And like most people know what a C chord is, and in the key of C, you can take on a piano and just put your fingers on C, E, and G, which is 1, 3, and 5. first, third, and fifth of the chord. And then you can move that chord up, and you have a 1 chord, or 2 chord, or 3 chord, or 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, and then you back up on the 1 chord again. And so you, Deceptive Cadence, instead of going to 1, you'll go to a chord that has 2 notes common with 1, but one that's different. Like the 3 chord has 2 notes common with the 1 chord. Or the 6th chord also has 2 notes common. And the 6th chord is actually the minor chord. Both of those are minor chords, the 1 chord and the 3 chord. And I'll use the 3 chord instead of the 1 chord and the 6th chord instead of the 1 chord a lot. I do that a lot. When your ear might tell you, oh, let's go back to 1, because this is leading to 1. Instead of going there, I'll go to 6, or I'll go to 3 quite often. And just as a simple way, there's lots of other places you can go. You can go to a new key by keeping just 1 note common in the new key and the old key. And I do that a lot also. It's called modulation. So I very rarely am writing music only in just 1 key. In fact, a lot of things I would do for EverQuest, I would write a theme and I'd play it in 1 key. And when it came back around, then I'd modulate to another key, usually a minor third above or below the original key, someplace that just, and then also change the orchestration on it so that it would have a different texture as well as a different key. And then that gave interest, although it was keeping things familiar. You heard the theme before, and familiarity in music is important too, because music is a art form that works through time, of course. And you have to repeat so that people have a chance to see the context of the theme, or to hear and understand what's going on. And your ear and brain kind of puts this together subliminally. You don't think necessarily about it, but you feel satisfied when you hear a piece of the song that you've heard before, but it's slightly different.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So one other thing I mentioned that I was going to talk to you about, there are 3, I talked to you about this, there are 3 elements of music that I think should be balanced and are very important to how people feel about the music. Those elements are harmony, melody, and rhythm. And each one has its function, and people react to each one differently. Harmony is emotional. It pulls at your heartstrings. You may go to a movie and hear the orchestra swell, no melody, no rhythm, nothing going on, but the orchestra is playing a certain chord, and that chord makes you feel a certain way, or the way the chord changes from one to another makes you feel grand or timid or sad, or whatever emotions they want to emote, they can do it with harmony. And so harmony is the most important of the 3 to me. Then another very important part is the melody, which appeals to your intellect. Music like Bach and Mozart, they create very intricate melodies that are very intellectual. And so you hear a theme and you think about that theme, and it kind of rolls around in your head, and it appeals to your intellect. You may like it because you like the way it's formed. And then the rhythm of the music has become a lot more important in popular music, because the rhythm, especially syncopation, affects your adrenaline system, and your fight or flight mechanism is kicked in by syncopated rhythms. A rhythm that's on the beat is very much like your heartbeat. Your heart beats very rhythmically. Anything cuts against that, it surprises you. It makes you maybe flinch a little for the first time, but rhythmic music that has a lot of syncopation in it, that affects your adrenaline system. And so it is also very catchy because of that. Your adrenaline is an addictive drug. And so that's why popular music is so rhythmic. Mm-hmm. It almost always has to be rhythmic in order to be catchy, in order to have feeling. And so those three elements of music are things that I strive to use in creative and balanced way.
And it's funny you mentioned talking about the surprise part of it. I was trying to basically repeat back what we had discussed to my wife yesterday while we were eating dinner and listening to music, because I think I mentioned it. There was one song, as you were describing before. There's a song by a band called Caius called Rodeo, and they transition. It just it's the same sort of, I don't know. I don't know the musical term for it, but it's like the same music over for a while, and it's building tension, and then it transitions, and then it transitions like 2 more times, and takes you to this completely different place that you would have never expected.
That's cool.
And it's just like, I don't hear it very often, but after we spoke, and I think about the EQ music, and I was even listening to the EQ soundtrack again, and it's interesting what kind of what journey that takes us on. It's kind of hard to imagine what you're thinking for each different place in every different song. Anything you could share with us about any of the songs you remember, or any of that process, I think would be really cool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, Keynotes, I did something similar to what you're talking about, where it opens up with that same theme in a little different context. Sometimes I would take a theme and use it with different settings, different arrangements. I'd have horn trombones back it up that were rhythmic trombones, maybe doing the harmony in a pattern. And by the way, what you were talking about is a musical phrase. So music always has, it's like sentences in music, right? You've got the phrase starts, and then it will have an ending, but the ending is not final in a typical musical phrase until the end, when it's final. So a lot of music just cycles around. I mean, sometimes it could be really simple. I get burnt. I get frustrated sometimes by a lot of popular music because it's so simple. There's like 4 chords in the whole song. Right. They just cycle the whole time. And lots of times it goes to show you this different thing about rhythm and harmony and melody, because a lot of songs, the harmony and melody are taken out of it. It's mostly rhythm, but that's okay in some contexts. But even the harmony is simplified, it's very simplified. So, that's typically not my way of thinking musically. I mean, I can write things that are done that way on purpose, but I usually don't. So, but there is a good thing to do where you try to simplify things and then build on the simplified version. So I'm trying to think, going back to the original question you asked about what was I thinking when I created a certain area or certain piece. And some of them, they were created before I actually had a zone for it.
Okay.
It was more that I was interested in the melody and the harmony and the rhythm, the way it came out. like the Achenon piece. If you can, da, 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 da. You know what song I'm talking about. Okay. La da da da, la da da da, la da da da, la da da. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe
I do. As a matter of fact, I think because I clicked play again on the song in the background, and right when you said that, I swear it was in perfect sync with the music.
Okay, well there you go. I'm channeling the music, but that music was a certain. I liked the grand feel of it. The harmony was kind of worked well. It had a little different beginning. I tried to set it up a little different, and I'm not even sure that the beginning worked really that well. I think I would probably rework it a little bit now, but that is typical of a lot of the music that I wrote. Is I try to write things first in a lot of ways. I mean, some of them I would take it and write it for the zone. But more important even than having a certain theme that fit the zone, I think, is to have themes that are catchy and memorable. And so that is really more of what I went for. I tried to write, and even the way I do it, when I focus on the harmonies, you can usually take a harmonic progression, chord progression, and then decorate it in a way with the melody or the rhythm or the context and the music and the instruments that I'm using. I can decorate it in a way that makes it fit a certain situation. I mean, you think about master movie composers like John Williams, one of my favorite composers. He takes a theme and he can twist it around in 100 different ways to make it fit almost any situation. And he does that. He doesn't necessarily, I mean, he writes a theme for certain pieces, like the Star Wars music, you have Darth Vader theme, Luke's theme, Leia's theme. They're all very memorable themes, but they're used in subliminal ways. Sometimes you don't even know that it's the theme play because it's so long and drawn out. You might take the notes and make each note 2 or 3 times as long as normal. And so the theme's still there, but you're really how you decorate it, how you're creating the context for it is different. So yeah, I think it's important to tie things together with music that is memorable and themes. And that's another pet peeve that I have about some current composers. I mean, there's some phenomenal film composers now, I think, that do.
Oh, okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry,
Something got tapped.
I hit the space bar accidentally. Sorry.
Cool.
So some composers are kind of forget about the theme. They're only scoring for emotion, and so I think, and some films, maybe to be fair, some films really need a lot less in terms of themes. That maybe the director doesn't want a lot of memorable theme music. Maybe they just want minimal music. And so, that's the way it is in that art form sometimes too. But I like music that is more memorable. And that's, of course, why I strove to do that with EverQuest music.
Yeah, there was.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. And
okay.
There's a question earlier about speaking of like other writing composers.
Yeah.
have you followed along like additional both EQ and then like game music, and have you been looking, have you noticed where there's maybe been people that have picked up on the work that you did originally and sort of tried to either intentionally take from it, or that you could just see that it was formative for them? Or
some people a couple people have asked me if I was influenced by different composers who wrote themes, and somebody said they saw or heard something that was very similar, they thought. And my answer is every composer takes inspiration from other composers. We all do that. And so nobody really writes totally original ideas in a certain sense. And yet there's so many ways to put things together that even if you're just taking pieces of things that you like and putting together, you're putting together in a way that's unique to you. So yeah, I have listened to other pieces, other people, but for me, most of my inspiration comes from originally, especially because before EverQuest, in college, I learned about great classical composers, and people like Tchaikovsky, I mentioned Grieg and Debussy. I loved his music. Chopin, I learned a lot of Chopin pieces, and also playing things on piano. When you actually have to learn pieces on the piano, like difficult pieces like Chopin's Nocturne, you have to take it apart and analyze and understand it at a different level. But so I like to learn from any composer that I can. And there are modern composers that I love. Like I said, there's a couple of young composers right now that I really think are great and talented, and that I learned things from. One is named Jason Collier, musical genius from England. If you're on YouTube, you've seen him. And also Charlie Puth. I love his arrangements and his music. He writes a lot of hit music for a lot of different people. But both of these guys understand music at a very deep level. And one of the things that is kind of it's interesting how it's kind of progressed in music is jazz harmony. There is a certain way of analyzing harmony through jazz harmony. And jazz was kind of invented in jazz harmony the way it's used now in the 30s and 40s. And a lot of theater music, a lot of show music used composers like Irving Berlin and George Gershwin. And those composers used jazz and did a lot of amazing things with it. And jazz harmony is it's a little harder to understand. But to me, jazz is kind of an extension of romantic harmony. And so I look at things from classical to jazz to pop to rock. All of those things are important influences in how people think about music and what they like when you listen to it. And so, some people, when they start hearing jazz, they think it's sort of old-fashioned. It becomes stereotyped. And that can be true. But I use it in a very sparse way. I try to use it in not a stereotypical way. Another composer that does this and who was very successful in the 80s and 90s is Steely Dan.
Yeah.
He wrote really complex pieces, and the harmonic progressions that he wrote were surprising. And that's cool because I get so bored with music that's just rehashing the same harmonies. Or what's worse, nowadays people will just take clips of the original and then put it together with, and then call it their own. Well, yeah, I think you've got to really be able to play and understand the music that you're writing and calling your own. And I appreciate the composers that do that. There are a lot of great composers out now, but like I said, everybody's always influenced by other things in the past.
Right. Another question came up, and it's interesting. The Kunark music, or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So, what happened there? Is there a story there, or was it?
Yeah. I don't think there's a story. I think maybe things just got down to the end, and it just didn't get much. I probably should have done more with it.
And then in the same question earlier, there was a question about the Luckland music triggers being busted, and so Luckland was the first project that I really worked on full time, and I didn't even think about Luckland music until I started streaming, and then people are like, "Let's listen to the Luckland music," and I was like, "Wait, Luckland had music?" And I think that's the first time I heard it.
The triggers got broken, you think?
Yeah, so that was the comment in chat. I don't remember it. In chat can let us know, but like I don't remember it at the time hearing it. It wasn't until after the fact.
Yeah, there could have been a software problem, a problem with it.
Yeah, so chat just confirmed that the music was not implemented in Luckland until like 2015 or 2016. It had the files, but they didn't trigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's there, like I said, there was music objects that were supposed to trigger music, and I placed those, went around and placing them, but maybe something happened in some iteration.
Well, I was there for that project shipping, and a lot of things happened. It came in pretty hot, so there's no telling what probably went on there. Earlier question was, do you have a favorite track? Is there one song that is your favorite, like you're most proud of?
I've been listening to them again, and even considering how I'm going to rearrange some of these now, because I'm working on that. And I have piano only versions of a lot of these. I just sit down and play, and I've made like piano only arrangements of almost everything. So I'm gonna put that out at some point, but also just new orchestral arrangements of it. And there's some new music, actually, new pieces like the EverQuest theme. I've got a whole new section of the EverQuest theme that people probably haven't heard yet. And but it is in the rock version that you talked about. Okay. If you go listen to the EverQuest classical then rock version, that has the new section in it. And I think probably the theme is the one I'm most proud of, but I also love the way the Kellythan music, people like that, and I think that came out really well. I've added to that. I've got some other sections that go with that too, and so I'm never kind of just resting on my laurels, so to speak. I always think I can do more and do better, and that's kind of my mentality. but I also am really proud of the J.T. Bach piece, because I learned a lot of Bach early in my piano studies, and Bach is the most complex composer of them all. He writes pieces with four melodies going on at the same time that all fit together and make the right harmony. And how in the world he does that? Well, I tried to analyze that, and that's kind of what I tried to do with J.T. Bach. It's basically counterpoint. It's really only two parts, but that fit together in the same way. But there's a way to write melodies in a way that they form harmonies when you write them. So that's what I did in that, and that's what Bach does a lot of in his music, and why it's his music is, I think, so timeless and so studied because of how he did. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was making noise earlier, so I muted. So Jay heard me. You guys didn't. Yeah. So there's a guy that's played a lot of your songs on piano. And
yes.
Nick was saying that he had. Nick, maybe you can say it again so I don't get it wrong, but he had like transcribed the bar
he did.
song and it named basically dedicated it to Jay. J.S. Barbeau on the thing.
That I appreciate that. That's I've noticed. I can't remember his name right now, the guy who did this, but I know he did a lot of work in creating that. You can use software now to create notation, but still you've got to do some work to make sure that it's clean and doing it right. And he also played, learned the pieces. So he had to learn them first without music, in which I applaud him for. That's that's one of the things I was saying that I think is important for people who really want to study music, is to try to play even a classical piece without the music. It's okay to sit down, learn it note for note, and play it exactly as it is. And there's a skill to doing that too. A lot of people are amazing sight readers. You can put any kind of music in front of them and they can play it. But they're like a machine. But a lot of them, don't really have that other connection to music. You ask them to improvise something or give them a chord progression and say, okay, make something out of this. And they would have a hard time because they're excellent technicians, but not really understanding the process that the composer goes through. So I think that's important in music, that you take a piece and try to make it your own. Try to play it by ear first, and then you'll discover things that you didn't really see or know or understand when you just take it by reading notes.
Yeah, when you make music, what do you see? Do you see the music or do you see the story that you're creating?
Yeah, I see. Well, I'm going for a feel, of course, but I just expand on the harmony that I'm thinking of. And I work until I find, now when I'm writing, okay, I'll write using piano and I'll write using guitar. And the process is usually different for both of those. But in piano now, I've come to the place where I'll play the harmony and the melody kind of together. Or I may sing the melody along with what I'm playing just in the harmony. That's simple. A lot of people like to do that. A lot of guitar players write that way. They'll just strum chords and sing a melody over the top of it. Okay. But I like to think in holistically in music and playing bass, harmony, melody, all together, and maybe even adding some counterpoint in there. So I think, like I think Bach did too, and I learned this from Bach, where I'm thinking multiple threads of the music at the same time, and how they can fit together. But the basis of it is the harmonic progression. So first, I'll look for an interesting harmonic progression, something interesting to me. And I'll just say, okay, what can you do with the harmony here? And another interesting thing about how that works with harmony is you can take harmony and stretch it by taking the regular chords that you're familiar with and changing one note of the chord in the middle or on top. And then what does that do to the sound? Or changing two notes. And then where does that going? Is that change going to lead someplace else? And you look at the half steps that are involved. Because in music, there's this thing called the leading tone, right? You play a scale, you go la da 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 da, and you don't want to stop there. You want to go ba. You want to go to the last note. Okay, so the leading tone is the seventh note in a scale, in a major scale. Other scales, it's a little different. But the leading tone has a strong pull. And though in music, those pulls and pushes and resting places are all important. And so I think sometimes even without thinking in terms of keys, I don't think, okay, I'm playing in the key of E flat. I may just thinking, okay, I've got an E flat major chord. Maybe I'll make it the 4 chord in B flat, or it's the 5 chord in A flat, or it's the flat 7 chord in F. You know, I'm thinking not necessarily keys. I'm just thinking feelings. And music like Debussy, I got this from him. His music is very keyless. It just has sort of chords that give you a feeling, and then they progress in some way, but they do so without having a specific key. And that's a whole new study of music that I, that I have gone on and tried to understand how. Really, there's a lot of different ways, I think, of analyzing music. And anything that's new, there's this newer thing that I found out called negative harmony. And it explains some things to me that it's sort of esoteric. But I got this from Jacob Collier, actually. And do you know Jacob Collier? You ever heard of him?
I don't, not by name, no.
Okay. He's kind of I don't know. He hasn't written a lot of recognizable music, but he's written some pretty cool things. But he puts together YouTube videos where he sings all the parts, and he's not a great singer, but he'll sing like up to 100 or 200 parts. He did this arrangement of Henry Mancini's song called, I can't remember the name of it right now, but he likes jazz music, and he'll create sort of jazz vocal arrangements, but he's also a phenomenal piano player. He's a phenomenal bass player, and he's like 20 something years old, and he's just a musical genius. And I really appreciate what he does and how he does it, and he's done TED Talks and different kinds of things for Cal Berkeley forums, where he goes and travels and teaches the students at Cal Berkeley. And he's just, the way he looks at things. Oh, and he collaborated with the likes of Quincy Jones and Herbie Hancock and people like that who are just, legends in music. And so he's really knows his stuff and what he's doing. So I appreciate and am always learning still from the way different people look at things, because to me, music is, you got different ways to create, and basically we're all using a well-tempered scale, 12 notes in the scale, but you can bend those notes. And Jacob Collier actually does a thing where he sings in between the notes in a piano. So he's got such a good ear that he can sing quarter tones, and he shifts everything he's doing just subliminally in a way that's in a key in between keys. And things like that, are creative, and that's phenomenal when you can push things that people are doing, to do something different and look at things different. Yeah,
for sure. On that note, there was a question earlier from Zarn in chat that asked, he asked, specifically wanted to ask about your compositions and if coming at it as a guitar guy differs from as a piano guy.
Okay. Yeah, actually some of the pieces for EverQuest, even though I played them all on piano, I kind of thought more in guitar. I know the piece in my head, but I can't remember what it's called in EverQuest right now. But there are pieces that I play the patterns like a guitarist would play them. Okay, and so on guitar, I, of course, started off plectron style, which means you use a pick, but then I learned finger picking techniques, and now I switch between the two whenever I, sometimes in mid-song. But I think I approach guitar like a keyboard player now, because I played keyboard for so long that I will look at the notes that I'm playing rather than thinking of chord patterns or even scale patterns. I'll look at the notes that I'm playing on guitar and I'll say, okay, what do those notes, where can I go with those notes like I would on a piano? So I think my piano has influenced my guitar playing and my guitar style, I think, and even how I write. But yet sometimes when I want to write like a guitar piece, I just think harmonically, and then I'm singing usually a melody in my head. But even quite often on guitar, I will make that melody come out on guitar. So I'm pretty good at arranging music on guitar so that the chords and the harmony and the bass all fit together rather than just playing chords and singing. I very rarely play just traditional open chords, like open string chords. Some open string chords have good uses, but I never play a C major chord like that. I'll play a bar C or something else usually, and I'll never play a G major chord like that the normal way, because the voicing on it I think is poor. And so what I go there in all of music, in guitar and keyboard and any polyphonic instrument, you need to think of how the notes fit together when they're sounded. And that's called voicing. On a piano, it's how you distribute the chord under your fingers. Okay, and so I'm always thinking about that. Like one rule that I never break on guitar or piano is I never double the third in a chord. I usually only have 1/3 And especially if you're playing a bass, sometimes I may double the third in the bass in an octave, but almost never, because the third of a chord is what distinguishes it. It's either major or minor or something, usually that's the main distinguishing feature of a chord is major or minor. But, and there's other chords, simple chords, of course, but because of the difference between those, you can play all the rest of the notes in just 1/3, and you can tell what kind of chord that is just from that 1/3. And so I arrange that way, and I think that way on both guitar and piano. And I've kind of developed, some rules about how I do things based on what I've learned in school and harmony in college. But I maybe mentioned this to you before. My music career started when I was 7. I played guitar for about 4 years until my teacher said, you need to find another teacher because I can't teach anymore. So I went and found a pianist who was really good at jazz harmony. And he taught me how to write jazz progressions and understand jazz. And so I went from basic in rock music, early on, to jazz music. And that was even before college. Then once I got into college, I learned how classical harmonies work. And I think actually a lot of my college professors didn't understand how jazz fit in with classical music, because a lot of my college professors understand Bach, and they understand 4-part harmonies and chorales, and we studied a lot of that when we were studying harmony in college. But I don't think they really understood how more complex harmonies, extended harmonies, they're called in jazz, and what you do with those chords, like 7 chords, 11th, 13th, 9th chords, all those different harmonies that add so much color to music. And some people just kind of throw those things in when they play, or they may learn styles like a lounge piano style, which I hate, but I think you need to really understand where that comes from, and so you can really make it your own, not just kind of mimic what other people are doing. I go back to that a lot. I say, whenever you're as a you should be a composer. I think some people just want to learn what other people are doing, and that's fine. They learn a certain style, and that's good. But you should also make it your own. Play it in every key you possibly can. When you learn something, play it in every key, and then try it in different ways, and make the technique your own. Bring your own creativity to it.
Yeah, there was a question much earlier this evening about whether you've used a full orchestra before.
Yeah, I have written for orchestra, but not really professional orchestra. And I would love to have the chance to write for a Hollywood orchestra or something like that. And I've had friends who work in the industry, and I just have not really been able to have but I'll have to say, I have this new tool called Staff Pad, and it's made for iPad or any tablet. You can get it for Android tablets too, and you can write regular music. It's made to write and recognize your handwriting, and then create complete scores just by writing on the tablet. And there are samples that it uses that are so phenomenal. It has a set of strings called the Berlin strings that they, recorded the Berlin Orchestra, but they've recorded all the articulations in different settings. So you can write the articulations on what you're writing and it'll play it that way. And if you listen to recordings done with this tool, it's I can't tell the difference between a Hollywood orchestra and someone using that tool. I mean, there's other sample sets you can get, and it's always kind of like the skill of the composer using it. Can they understand how to write for it, as well as do they know how to play the samples so that they sound realistic? And that can take a lot of work. But one of the cool things about StaffPad is if you write it, it interprets it so well that it seems to really sound very realistic. Can you write dynamics in, you write string articulations in? The strings are very sensitive instruments that get a lot of different emotions and feelings depending upon how they're played, right? Even how you're sweeping, or how you're vibratoing. Are you a wide vibrato or a narrow vibrato or open strings? All those different things, you get different feelings from them. So I'm kind of beginning to, I've got the tool, I'm beginning to explore more with that content.
Oh, right on. Yeah. So a couple of comments and questions that came up in chat got me thinking. How challenging is it to write for such diverse environments, especially given the time constraints for projects like EQ expansions and EQ originally? And were there songs that you would have liked to do, but there were restrictions, whether that be technical or just time constraints?
Yeah. Time is a factor, but from when I was on the original EverQuest, I had a period where I was just composing and not doing other things, and that worked best. That I was most productive when I was doing that. Expansions came out. Some of them I wasn't involved with, I wasn't working on. So after a while, I think I hit my sweet spot when I can just focus on producing as much music as I can in the best quality that I can. And sometimes you just take as long as it takes, to make it work and to make it good. So my goal is to just produce good music, no matter what it's for. But you got to understand the need and the context of it too, of course, but and take direction from the people who are involved in the creation process.
Was there much back and forth on that front?
There really wasn't a lot. Usually they just tell me, oh, we like what you're doing. And so I didn't get, which I think was great in a lot of ways, because there was so much to do that if they trusted me in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And so that was good. And I think that also made it come out a little more homogeneous than it would have. If I was always changing things because so-and-so did or did not like this, it wouldn't have been as homogeneous of a work, I think.
Right.
And it wouldn't have maybe have had the effect that it did.
one question that came up that I want to make sure I don't miss. That's a non sequitur. Is there a place where you can get fan mail or where if someone wanted to send you fan mail of some sort, email or whatever?
Yeah. I should give. Yeah, I'll give you my Jay Barbeau at outlook.com.
Okay. Cool.
Just Jay Barbeau, all one word, at outlook.com. I appreciate fan mail, and I'll try to even answer it. If you guys ask good questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Cool. Yeah, the again, as you were mentioning, like there is a certain consistency where when I listen to the old tracks and stuff, I kind of imagined that was the answer. Like it didn't seem like there were a lot of hands in that. It seemed more like a creation that you just kind of put forward.
It was. And, it was very much.
Which, with that in mind, makes it all the more kind of astonishing, the variety. And it's funny when you mentioned Akanon earlier, and we had the clip playing a little bit, and I just hear it and I'm like, it's got such just the amazing kind of City of Tomorrow kind of feel to it as well. And and
that's cool.
Yeah,
I think it's amazing to me that how music works and that people feel what I'm feeling when I'm doing things. And I just did try to be creative and different feelings, different contexts. That's exactly what I was going for. And to have the freedom to do that I've actually, EverQuest was the first time I had worked full time on music. Well, I can't say that. In the college days, I worked full time writing music for musical plays, but it was a different kind of writing too. But I was used to, I got used to at that point, I guess, writing because I needed to, for a specific goal. And sometimes it's hard to do that unless you just sit down and make yourself be productive regularly. You just got to kind of sit down and try new things and come up with new things. Some people get writer's block, but I find that I can always usually come up with something that's needed. Whether or not people really are enamored with it is another question.
Fair enough. One thing that I was trying to convey to some folks I spoke with after we spoke last week was I've always just naturally associated you with music, and that was. But then when you're talking about your other work and your technical work and background, would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yeah, let me share that. Yeah, I've always been involved in interactive technologies, put it that way. And I kind of felt, in 2010, I don't know if I shared this with you, Sean, but I made some connections with some music executive type people. And I kind of wanted to integrate everything I had been working on in my past, which is MIDI guitar controller, piano teaching software, writing music, and performance and that kind of thing. So I created a company called Musical spelled with a Y, MUSYCAL. And the goal there was to create a portal that was online where people could connect with each other in different ways for either learning music. Actually, the byline was musical, everything music, connect, play, learn, create. So you could go to this web portal, and I created a fly through. It's still it's still out there right now, but it's called music.me. If you go to musyc.me, then that gives you the vision of what I was trying to do. And I started learning how to code in 3D graphics through that experience. But I, working in EverQuest, it was a 3D game engine that was a DirectX game engine, but it was specifically, of course, custom engine for EverQuest. But nowadays, company, and even back then, Unreal was kind of a thing, just starting out. And so there's now two main game engines, Unreal and Unity. And Unreal, I did in musical, sort of a fly through in a world that I created for a demo of this thing that I was putting together. And I wanted to be able to have music teachers connect to students. Students will be able to connect to each other and perform, a whole thing that would foster musical interests, even in people who didn't necessarily think they were that musical, just kind of wanted to explore and see what was possible. So that's still a desire, but the financing of that didn't happen the way I'd hoped it would. So I couldn't just make it go full time. But I did get into 3D graphics quite a bit through that. I actually became a Unity expert in developing a flight simulator for a company called ATC. And I had also done some work in avionics for different companies locally, some graphics development for companies that were doing avionics. But so it was kind of a natural thing. But this company had created flight simulators that the US Forest Service uses to train with, but their software was really old and they wanted to replace it. So I bid and won the bid to do that, replace their software. I did it in Unity. I was the sole creator, and you can see my work on a website that I made called Air Attack 2. So airattack2.com shows that work, that I did. And there are basically 9 flight simulators that that work together to train pilots in a process that they use for attacking wildfires. And they train with this every year. So it was kind of cool. It was kind of a very fun project, very demanding project to work on. I ended up spending about a year full time on the facility in Sacramento, just installing the software and debugging it and getting it all to work. But I learned a lot about Unity for that, and I'm keeping up on Unity. I've done other work. I have a company right now that has won some Air Force and Army contracts for their drone, and I'm creating a simulator for them. So I kind of got into flight simulators, and it's kind of a backhanded way that it came about, but it's interesting work. I'd rather be doing just music full time, and maybe I'll be able to do that still. But my dream for helping teachers and musicians and interested people connect musically, and I think there's probably some room for something like that in the world and on the internet. So I don't know. I'm still working at that, but we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, there was just a question in chat. Speaking of Unity, as to whether or not you've seen there's essentially a community-driven project to recreate EverQuest in the Unity engine. Unity? Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I don't know about it. I'll check it out.
Yeah, I can make sure you get the link to that stuff. It's really cool. the person in chat, Modestall, that asked the questions, done some really great work in upresing the textures and things like that as well. So
yeah,
it's very cool to see what the community's been doing with EQ.
Yeah, I'd like to find out and keep on track with that. Yeah, I think Unity has some very cool things that they're doing with data-oriented programming. And maybe people know that. They have some amazing demos out from 2021 called Mega City. If you check that out on YouTube, it's amazing. Through data-oriented programming, you can take advantage of the modern architecture of a PC and create a lot of detail that renders very quickly. And what they do in this demo is they have buildings that have hundreds of thousands of parts to them. And they have like about 5,000 or 6,000 vehicles flying around. And it's just so much detail, it's mind-boggling. But it's all done through this fairly new technology that Unity's developing called DOTS, Data-Oriented Tech Stack. And so I'm kind of trying to keep up on that and get engaged and involved with that because it's new. And then there's some other new things with Unreal that are also phenomenal. And so yeah, it's a great time to be a developer right now.
Yeah. When you talk about making music, when you say that, like what's the image in your head? Do you think of music sort of generally applicable to whatever? Do you picture movies? Is it a love for video games?
Yeah. I picture any art form that will support the kind of music I'd like to make. And video games works, movies would work, but I've always just found I'm not really good at marketing myself, I guess, and making all the connections necessary. And so I early on, I kind of thought it'd be nice to be a film composer, but never was able to make the connections to do that. I mean, I did a little work here and there for videos, different people, but EverQuest was kind of a happy happenstance that came about and allowed me an outlet for my music, and that's I just want to write music for whoever appreciates it. That's that's good, and I also like popular music, music that people listen to. I think, I don't know, it's so I would write any kind of music that if people enjoyed it, I'd work at it.
Right. Yeah. When you say it, it's interesting because of I have to imagine that a lot of the folks listening in right now, if they're like me, and people have been commenting, so I mean, I know there are a lot of folks that fall in this category. Like we are so inspired by the EverQuest music, and it's played such a big role in our life that I'm amazing. Sure when people hear you say, well, like I what was it you just said? Like I'm not good at self promoting. The music is definitely spoken for you for 20 years.
Well, I appreciate the way people like it, and I just feel fortunate to have been in the right place at the right time, and I hope that I have opportunities to do more. I mean, I'm definitely doing more, but I'll let people know when I come up with something new. I'll let you know, but let the EQ community that I'm working on stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll definitely make sure that you get the links to the community projects and stuff that we were talking about here. But
yeah,
I definitely want to talk to you more and kind of see how things are going and talk to you about your interest in making new music.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd love to talk anytime.
Cool. And then to hit an earlier question, you had mentioned reworking some of the EQ music. There was a question in chat about whether or not that was for a project or if that's something that you're just doing as like a passion project at the moment. Or?
It's a passion project right now. But I want to get, there's been some releases of my music that is just the original sequences done with some newer synthesizers, but that's a little incomplete because there's a vision for how to arrange and orchestrate the music that I have that I'd like to do from scratch rather than just taking the original sequences, because those were played with an approximation in mind. I was getting feedback from the synthesizers I was using at the time. And so I tried to make the best music I could out of those synthesizers. But now when I have new instruments and they're capable of making a much more convincing string section or horn section or woodwind section, I can make I think a better rendering, not just rendering, but also the arranging. And also I might think just the beginnings and ends, because of the way EverQuest was written, it was piece of music that lasted about 2 minutes or so and then cycled. Well, I might do something a little different now where they would maybe go into a new theme, or it could go back to different places. So I'm thinking of making something that works a little differently than the original layout, the way it worked, but using modern samples and tools. Because actually the cool thing about modern synthesizers is not just the samples. The samples are great, but what's really good is they make instruments that play like an orchestra plays. For example, if you play an orchestra run, you play a run of notes. If you play it on any synthesizer, you just hear all the notes individually, and the articulations are perfect. They're sequential, and maybe a scale that goes. But in a real string orchestra, none of the string players are in sync perfectly. One are on one note, another one's halfway through the other note, and there's 10 to 20 string players all playing this run. So it gives you this sweep sound when you play that. Well, that's hard to mimic on some synthesizers that are just trying to be faithful to the sound. But they've made these synthesizers now that detect when you're playing a fast scale or a string of notes, it's a sweep sound. So they make the strings sound like a string orchestra. Or if you jump from this note to that note in a legato fashion, you string players will typically play the bottom note in legato and then kind of swoop up to the top note. And that gives a very emotional lift to the sound. And that can be done now with current string sample players. And things like the machine gun sound that you get, where repeated notes that are identical, they do things called round robin, where it changes the sample that's playing. So it's playing random, slightly different samples of the same note, so that it sounds more like a real orchestra does. And all these things are very cool, but you gotta, take advantage of them. You got to learn how to use it and do that. So that's part of what I want to do actually with the EverQuest music, is redo it using these cool tools that are available there.
Cool. And on the hardware side, do you use anything special or?
Oh, yeah, I've got a full gaming PC, but I've got a tablet that I was using. I was talking about staff pad. I bought actually a PC because I have Sonar that I use as my DAW, digital audio workstation. And so I've had Macs and I've used Macs, but for this, it kind of made sense. It's a laptop that can be a tablet, folds in half, and it has a scribe. So I can use it for staff pad, and I can also use Sonar on it. And so I've got that set up on my digital piano. I've got a digital grand piano that I use. And then I have another piano that I use that's a Yamaha DGX 650 that I love the piano sound on that. It's a great, smooth sounding piano. And so I use those, but also I'm using Contacts, sample players. I'm using, I have other sample libraries, but I want to get the Berlin strings. Spitfire Audio's got some good things. I have some other things that are a little older that I've used them well. One's called Garrett and Personal Orchestra. So yeah, I've got a PC here that's basically just a gaming PC that I use for any of my 3D development work. But and I also have all the audio tools on that too. But yeah, that's what I use.
Very cool. Cool. So I'm gonna ask chat now because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
Chat, did we miss any big questions? I know I missed a few in there as we were going, but anything major you want to ask before we wrap up here? I tried to hit as many questions as I could as we were going. You may have jotting down notes and stuff on a little tablet here as we went.
Yeah.
So
well, I've had fun. I've enjoyed talking about it, and I always, answer any questions anybody.
Oh, there was a question about a custom sound font.
Yeah. I think some of the current sound fonts that are out there are messed up. I've gotten some of the ones that are out there that were gleaned from EQ, but I did make a custom sound font, and I think it was just called Synth User 2. And I'm trying to find my original sound font to make sure I have the right thing. And I've looked at several of the things that are out there, but yeah, I tried to make it smaller so it would fit on more sound cards at the time. And so it was like 500K, I think, the original sound font. That's all it was. But there are some other sound fonts that people have made that are different, added to it. And you gotta, some parts aren't going to come out if you don't have sounds in the right slots. So that's kind of a hassle. And that's another reason why I want to create, good recorded tracks, audio tracks. And I'm thinking of creating audio tracks that are compressed but multi-track, so I can do some arrangement on the fly type things. Some people may have noticed, for example, in the arrangement on the fly thing, if you ever go back to the original game and the character creation screen, there is music that changes on the fly with your race that you choose to be your character. So an ogre has kind of a tubby sound, a dwarf, a dinky sound, and elf maybe more refined or something. But those tracks change on the fly. And what I did was I made lots of tracks that were meant to be muted and unmuted based on what you chose as your race. But what happens is if you play the track without the logic that mutes and unmutes the tracks, you get all the tracks. And it sounds almost like, a cacophony. It's just kind of noisy because it's all the tracks playing at once. It wasn't meant to be played that way. So if you ever notice in the character creation screen, if you play it outside the game, that's the kind of problem you'll have.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're seeing chat on your end, Jay.
Yeah, it's over on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, so people are expressing their appreciation for that, and as we wrap up here, folks that are in chat, if you would let Jay know what you think about the EQ music and how it has affected you over the years. One more time, just in case you missed it earlier. And yeah, like I said, I want to say that it's super, super awesome to have you here. Your music, honestly, it's like, even now I get a little teary eyed thinking about just how badass it was to basically install EverQuest and have that be part of the experience, and it's huge. You're fantastic, dude.
Well, I'm humbled and honored that people like what I've done so much. I hope to live up to your accolades that I want to do more. And I'll keep you posted. But I think there's more opportunities that more to come. Maybe through one of our collaborations in the new versions that we're doing in EverQuest.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of road ahead, and I think I mentioned before I'd love the opportunity to follow up with you and see if there's some ideas we could bounce around as well. I really appreciate the time that you've given us. And
sure. One more thing I would like to mention maybe. I had planned on, I talked to you about musical, but I had planned on making a YouTube channel that kind of teaches music theory the way I look at it. Because I have, I think, some different ideas about music theory. And what I've actually done is I've created a Unity app that I can play piano. You'll see the notes, you see the chord analysis, and on the staff, and the notes itself that you're playing on the keyboard and thing, all at the same time. So the goal there is to use that as a way to analyze chord progressions and harmonies and voicings and all that stuff. So I'm going to put up a YouTube channel eventually, pretty soon here. And I wrote the software a while back, but I need to finish it and also finish my curriculum outline so I can make a cohesive curriculum that teaches harmony the way I think about it. Well, so just to let everybody know,
we'll absolutely get people over there as soon as it's ready to go, as soon as it's up. As soon as I find out about it, I'll send everybody on our end over. And
I'll let you know. That's
cool.
Great.
And one more time, the email address you had mentioned, it's Jay Barbeau
at Outlook. So JayBarbeau.
Okay.
At outlook.com.
Right on. Cool. Well, I
try that first. I'll give you one more. Also, my Gmail is the same way. That's just my regular email account. Send it to the other one first. I'll probably see it more often because I get a lot of junk in my regular email. But if you don't get a response from Outlook, then try jbarbeau@gmail. I should get like EQComposer@gmail or something like that, you know?
Up on it.
Yeah, I should do that.
Cool. Well, Jay, anytime if you remember something and you're like, oh, I forgot to talk about this, or if we get a flood of questions or whatever, I'd love to have you back. I definitely, again, I appreciate you being here. Yeah,
keep I'm sure you're monitoring all the questions you get. If you find a bunch of new things that people want to know, just let me know and we'll talk again.
Awesome.
Cool. Great, Sean. You're a good host.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Cool. All right, Jay.
All right. My
Thanks again.
All right. Talk to you later.
Later on.
Bye.